Have you ever imagined what it would be like to be a female leader in a society where men dominated everything? Deborah lived during a challenging period in Israel's history, the time of the Judges. It was a time of chaos and disunity where each tribe lived independently, facing constant threats from external enemies and internal struggles. In the midst of this turmoil, a figure no one expected emerged: Deborah, a woman chosen by God to lead. What's most remarkable is that Deborah didn't just lead, she was respected by everyone. She sat under the Palm of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim, where the people of Israel came to her for counsel and justice. Picture the scene: men and women traveling from afar to hear the wise words of a woman who spoke with authority, not through force but through divine inspiration. In this context, Deborah represents a powerful breakthrough. She proves that God is not limited by social norms or human expectations. He chooses whomever he wills, regardless of gender or social status. Have you ever felt like you needed to be the voice of truth, even when no one seemed willing to listen? Deborah wasn't just a judge, she was a prophetess. This means she received direct guidance from God to lead the people. Her spiritual life was marked by a deep relationship with the Creator, something that gave her clear vision amid the chaos in Israel. While many turned to idolatry and disobedience, Deborah remained steadfast. Her voice was a beacon of light in a time of darkness. People sought her out because they knew she was guided by God, not by personal interests. This connection with God empowered her to make tough decisions, even in a context where her position as a woman could have been challenged. And here lies the lesson: when God calls us, he equips us, regardless of the circumstances or others' opinions. Have you ever hesitated to act, even when you knew it was the right thing to do? One day Deborah received a word from God. Go summon Barak, son of Abinoam, and tell him that the Lord commands him to gather 10,000 men and go to Mount Tabor. There, God will deliver Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, into his hands. Barak was an experienced general, but he hesitated. He knew Jabin's army had 900 iron chariots, an overwhelming force against Israel. He replied to Deborah, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." This response reveals Barak's reliance on Deborah's spiritual leadership. On one hand, it highlights her authority. On the other, it raises questions about Barak's confidence in his own ability to lead. Deborah agreed to go, but made it clear, "Certainly, I will go with you. But the honor of this victory will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." This exchange is profound. It reminds us that even in our hesitation, God can use our weaknesses to fulfill his purposes. Have you ever faced a challenge that seemed impossible to overcome? As Barak gathers the 10,000 men of Israel, Deborah stands by his side, strengthening his faith and reminding him of God's promise. She doesn't just prophesy, she inspires. Jabin's army, led by Sisera, is an intimidating force. Their 900 iron chariots symbolize power and oppression, and Israel, with no resources, seems to have no chance. But Deborah knows that this battle will not be won by human strength, but by divine intervention. She declares with conviction, "Rise, Barak. Today is the day the Lord will deliver Sisera into your hands. The Lord has already gone ahead of you. Here." Deborah teaches us a crucial lesson. In times of doubt and fear, we need voices that remind us of God's power. Who has been that voice in your life? Have you ever witnessed faith triumph over the impossible? When the battle begins, something extraordinary happens. God sends a heavy rainstorm, turning the battlefield into mud. Sisera's iron chariots, once so feared, become stuck in the drenched ground, leaving the Philistine army vulnerable. Barak and his men charge with renewed courage. The battle is a rout. The enemies are defeated, and Sisera abandons his chariot, fleeing on foot. At this moment, we see how Deborah was an instrument of God to inspire faith and courage. She didn't wield a weapon, but her spiritual and moral leadership was vital for the victory. Have you ever seen someone once powerful lose everything by trusting the wrong strength? Sisera, the feared commander of Jabin's army, is on the run. The man who once led an invincible force now flees on foot, without his iron chariots, without his army, without honor. Desperately, he seeks refuge while Barak and his men pursue him relentlessly. The contrast could not be more striking. On one side, a leader who trusted in military power. On the other, a people who trusted in the living God. This scene reminds us that true strength lies not in weapons or numbers, but in faith and obedience to divine purpose. As Sisera flees, he arrives at the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Canaanite. Heber had allied himself with Jabin, the king of Canaan, and Sisera believes he will be safe there. He doesn't know that his defeat is about to be sealed, not at the hands of Barak, but by an unexpected woman. Have you ever wondered how God can use unlikely people to accomplish his will? Jael, an apparently ordinary woman, welcomes Sisera into her tent with hospitality. She invites him inside, offers him milk to quench his thirst, and covers him with a blanket, creating a false sense of security. Exhausted and confident that he is safe, Sisera gives Jael instructions. Stand at the entrance of the tent. If anyone asks if someone is here, say no, but Jael has other plans. When Sisera falls into a deep sleep, Jael takes a tent peg and a hammer, approaches silently and drives the peg through Sisera's temple, killing him instantly. This act is brutal but also courageous. Jael, a woman without military or political standing, is used by God to complete Israel's victory. Her bravery teaches us that God can use any of us to fulfill his plans, regardless of our position or circumstances. Have you ever witnessed an unexpected victory that defies all expectations? When Barak finally arrives at Jael's tent, still pursuing Sisera, she comes out to meet him and says, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." Imagine the scene. Barak enters the tent and sees Sisera dead, with the tent peg driven through his head. The victory, which he thought would be his, was delivered to a woman, just as Deborah had prophesied. This twist reminds us that honor does not belong to those who fight with weapons, but to those who obey God's voice. Barak may have led the army, but the final victory was granted to Jael, a woman who heard the divine call and acted courageously. Have you ever celebrated a victory that was only possible through God's grace? After the complete victory over Sisera and Jabin's army, Deborah and Barak compose a song to celebrate the triumph. This song, recorded in Judges 5, is one of the oldest hymns in the Bible and exalts God's power, the courage of leaders, and the cooperation of the people. Deborah begins with words of gratitude. When the leaders lead in Israel, when the people willingly offer themselves, blessed be the Lord. The song recounts the events of the battle, from Barak's call to the divine intervention of rain and mud that disabled the iron chariots. Deborah also exalts Jael's bravery. Most blessed of women is Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Blessed is she among women living in tents. This hymn is not just a celebration of victory, but an acknowledgement that God is the true author of deliverance. It reminds us to thank and honor God for every victory in our lives. Have you ever experienced relief after years of suffering? The victory over Sisera marks the beginning of a new chapter for Israel. Jabin, the king of Canaan, loses his military strength and is ultimately defeated. The people, who had been oppressed for 20 years, now experience peace and freedom. Under Deborah's leadership, Israel enjoys a rare period of stability during the time of the judges. Her wisdom, courage, and faith united the tribes and showed the people that great things happen when they follow God. However, Deborah's story also challenges us to reflect. How can we turn moments of victory into lasting change? The peace Israel experiences is temporary, and cycles of idolatry and oppression return after the judges' deaths. Have you ever imagined having to resolve conflicts and make decisions that impact an entire nation? Deborah was not just a prophetess and spiritual leader, she also held the role of a judge. In a time marked by disorder and instability, Deborah stood out as the highest authority in Israel. Under her palm tree, between Ramah and Bethel, people from all tribes came to her seeking justice. What makes her role even more remarkable is the cultural context in which she lived. Israelite society was largely patriarchal, and seeing a woman in a leadership position was rare, if not unique. Yet Deborah earned respect, not through force but through her wisdom, impartiality, and connection with God. An example of this is the way she handled tribal disputes. The tribes of Israel, often divided by rivalries and cultural differences, found, in Deborah, a leader capable of uniting divergent views. She not only judged individual cases, but also promoted peace and cooperation in a period where disunity was the norm. Have you ever tried to bring together people with completely different perspectives to achieve a common goal? The victory over Sisera was not just a military feat, it was also a testament to Deborah's ability to unite tribes that were often in conflict. In her song, Deborah celebrates the tribes that joined the fight: Zebulun, Naphtali, Issachar, and Ephraim. She highlights the role of each tribe and praises their bravery. However, the song also points out the tribes that refused to participate: Reuben, Gilead, Dan, and Asher. These tribes prioritized their own interests and stayed on the sidelines of the battle. This duality reveals a constant challenge during the time of the judges: the lack of unity among the tribes. Despite her efforts, Deborah faced the limitations of leading a people who often placed individual interests above the collective. Still, she managed to inspire enough cooperation to achieve a decisive victory, demonstrating the power of leadership focused on the common good. Have you ever had to rely completely on God in the midst of impossible circumstances? Deborah was not just a strategist and judge, she was, above all, a woman of faith. Her trust in God is evident from the moment she calls Barak to lead the army. When he hesitates, Deborah does not lose her confidence. The episode where she declares that victory would be given by God, but that the honor would fall to a woman, is not just a prophecy, it is a demonstration of her unshakable faith. She knew that regardless of the circumstances, God would fulfill his word. Deborah also relied on divine guidance in her decisions as a judge. This dependence on God was the foundation of her wisdom and the trust the people placed in her. Deborah teaches us that true leadership begins with submission to God and trust in his promises. Have you ever celebrated an achievement that seemed impossible to reach? Deborah's song, recorded in Judges 5, is more than a celebration of a military victory. It is an exaltation of God's power and the cooperation of his people. Deborah does not seek personal glory in the song. On the contrary, she gives full credit to God and acknowledges the people's efforts. In the song, Deborah details how God intervened in the battle. The rain that flooded the battlefield and neutralized Sisera's iron chariots is presented as a direct act of God. This reinforces the central idea that Israel's victory was not the work of human strength, but of divine intervention. Deborah also uses the song to inspire future generations, exalting the courage of those who rose to fight and criticizing the indifference of the tribes that stood by. It is a powerful reminder that God honors those who act with faith and courage. Have you ever wondered how your actions today can impact future generations? Deborah is a rare example of female leadership in the Bible, but her legacy goes beyond her gender. She represents leadership based on service, faith, and obedience. Her impact was so significant that Israel experienced 40 years of peace after her leadership, something rare in the time of the judges. However, Deborah's story also challenges us to reflect on the limitations of the moment. Despite her victory, internal divisions among the tribes remained, and Israel eventually returned to idolatry and oppression. This reminds us that momentary victories, no matter how significant, must be accompanied by lasting changes to bring about true transformation. Deborah teaches us that leaders are not defined by their gender, position, or circumstances, but by their willingness to serve God and others with faithfulness and courage. Have you ever witnessed a moment of unity that, although temporary, brought hope? Deborah achieved something rare in her time, uniting tribes that were often in conflict. Under her leadership, tribes like Zebulun, Naphtali, Ephraim, and Issachar came together in a collective effort to defeat the oppressive Canaanites. However, this cooperation was brief. Deborah's song reflects both the celebration of unity and the disappointment with the tribes that chose not to join the fight. Reuben, for instance, is noted for its great debate without taking concrete action, while Dan and Asher are criticized for staying safely near the sea. This dynamic portrays the challenge of maintaining unity among a people divided by tribal and cultural interests. With her wisdom, Deborah inspired a moment of unity, but divisions soon re-emerged. This prompts us to ask, how can we turn momentary unity into lasting change? Have you ever experienced a period of peace after long years of conflict? The victory of Deborah and Barak brought significant relief to Israel. After 20 years of oppression under Jabin, the Israelites finally experienced freedom. This peace lasted 40 years, a significant milestone during the period of the Judges, when conflicts were frequent. During these years, Deborah continued to serve as a judge, ensuring justice and order were upheld. Her leadership was a beacon of stability, allowing Israel to thrive during a time of tranquility. But this peace also comes with a warning. The period of the Judges is marked by a cycle of disobedience, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. While Deborah led with excellence, the peace was only temporary, and Israel soon reverted to its old habits of idolatry. Have you ever stopped to reflect on the impact a single person can have on history? Deborah is unique in the biblical narrative. She not only broke cultural barriers by leading as a woman, but also played a crucial role in preserving Israel as a nation. Her wisdom, courage, and faith inspired both men and women to rise up in a time of crisis. However, her impact extends beyond her era. The Song of Deborah, recorded in Judges 5, is a timeless testimony to her leadership. It not only recounts the events of victory, but also exalts the values of courage, faith, and cooperation. Deborah teaches us that true leaders do not seek personal glory, but work for the greater good. She is an example of how servant leadership can inspire meaningful change, even in challenging times. Have you ever wondered why momentary victories don't always lead to lasting change? Despite her exemplary leadership, Deborah faced the limitations of her time. The victory over Jabin was significant, but it did not resolve Israel's structural and spiritual problems. The tribes remained divided, and idolatry persisted. This leads us to reflect on the nature of the changes we seek. Momentary victories are important, but must be accompanied by internal and structural transformation to create lasting impact. Deborah fulfilled her mission with excellence, but Israel's cycle of disobedience reminds us of the need for deep changes in people's hearts. Have you ever thought about what you will leave as your legacy? Deborah is remembered as one of the most remarkable figures of the Judges period. Her story is an example of leadership, faith, and courage, but also a warning about the fragility of human victories. Her legacy teaches us that God can use anyone, regardless of gender or position, to fulfill His purposes. She also challenges us to reflect on the type of change we seek. Fleeting moments or lasting transformations, Deborah inspires us to lead with wisdom, trust in God, and work for the greater good, regardless of circumstances. Her story is a powerful reminder that even in times of crisis, there is hope for those who trust in God. Have you ever wondered how a single life can inspire so many people, even centuries later? Deborah was not just a leader in her time. She became a symbol of courage, faith, and wisdom for all generations. Her story is a reminder that God chooses whom He wills, breaking cultural barriers, gender prejudices, and human expectations. Over the centuries, her figure has been celebrated for showing that true leadership does not depend on physical strength, but on spiritual strength. Deborah not only led Israel to victory over Jabin and Sisera, but also became a living example of balancing firmness with compassion, authority with service. Deborah's life challenges us to look within ourselves. Are we ready to answer God's call, even when it means going against norms or facing criticism? Her story continues to inspire those who seek to lead with integrity and purpose. Have you ever thought about what it means to lead by example, rather than by power? Deborah did not seek personal glory or wealth. Instead, her leadership was marked by a genuine desire to serve God and the people of Israel. She teaches us that true leadership is about service, not control. One important lesson from Deborah is her ability to inspire others. From Barak, who trusted her to lead in battle, to the tribes that united under her command, Deborah was a catalyst for action. She didn't just give orders, she motivated, encouraged, and guided with divine wisdom. And what about us? How can we apply this model of leadership in our lives? Whether in our families, workplaces, or communities, we can learn from Deborah to lead with humility, putting others and divine purposes first. Have you ever wondered how ancient stories can be so relevant to our times? Deborah's story is not just about the past. It's also about the present. In a world still filled with inequalities, rivalries, and crises, Deborah shows us that faith and determination can overcome even the toughest challenges. Deborah also teaches us the importance of listening to God's voice. She didn't make decisions based on personal interests or external pressures, but sought divine guidance. This spiritual connection is something we can all strive for in our own lives, especially when facing uncertain times. Moreover, her story is a powerful reminder that God uses unlikely people to accomplish great things. Regardless of our circumstances or limitations, we can make a difference when we trust in God. Have you ever reflected on how Deborah broke barriers in a male-dominated society? Deborah is a brilliant example of the role of women in the biblical narrative. In a time when male leadership was the norm, she stood out as a judge, prophetess, and military leader. Her story proves that God's calling transcends cultural expectations. But her leadership was not just about power or authority. Deborah showed that it is possible to lead with grace, compassion, and firmness. She is an inspiration to all women facing challenges in their personal or professional journeys. Looking at Deborah's story, we see how the Bible presents women who, like her, played fundamental roles in God's plan. Deborah reminds us that God values and empowers everyone, regardless of gender or social position. Have you thought about how Deborah's story could transform your life today? Deborah's story is more than a historical account. It's an invitation to reflection. She challenges us to trust in God, even in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. She inspires us to lead with integrity, serve with humility, and live with purpose. Now I ask you, what can you learn from Deborah? Which areas of your life need courage and faith like hers? If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Here we explore incredible stories from the Bible that inspire, transform, and strengthen our faith. Don't forget to like this video, share it with friends and family, and leave in the comments what impacted you most about Deborah's life. And of course, check out our other videos, where we dive into the lives of biblical characters and the lessons they have to teach us. May God bless your life and your family. See you in the next video.